East Antarctica. A plateau of ice roughly the size of Western Europe, 2,300 meters above sea level, where the average year-round temperature is -57 degrees Celsius. In winter, the air here drops to -89, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in under 90 seconds. In 1959, the United States Army hid a nuclear reactor under the Greenland ice sheet, intentionally, for reasons they classified immediately. That is not the strangest thing NASA has found under the ice. Today, I will show you 5 discoveries made by satellite radar, airborne sensors, and drilling teams, each one found in a place where nothing was supposed to be. The escalation is simple. Each find is more impossible than the one before, not in distance, but in what it costs us to explain. The last item on this list was buried 252 million years ago, and may be the reason most life on Earth once stopped existing. None of these missions were designed to find what they found. That is the part that matters most. The story begins in northwestern Greenland and a city no government ever admitted to building. Camp Century. Built in 1959 by the United States Army Corps of Engineers at a depth of 35 meters beneath the ice sheet, roughly 240 kilometers east of Thule Air Base, the engineers excavated 21 chambers. They installed a nuclear reactor, the PM-2A portable unit, rated at 1.5 megawatts. They called it a polar research station. They classified the real program immediately. Project Iceworm. The plan was to conceal up to 600 medium-range nuclear ballistic missiles beneath the Greenland ice, mobile on rail cars, pre-aimed at targets inside the Soviet Union, concealed from satellite reconnaissance by ice and snow. The tunnel network required for full deployment was 11,000 kilometers. The government of Denmark, which administered Greenland, was told nothing about this. The classified documents were not fully declassified until 1997. Picture one of the 200 soldiers assigned to Camp Century in 1961. He sleeps in a chamber carved from translucent blue-green ice, 35 meters below the surface. A nuclear reactor runs 100 meters away. Temperature inside is held at a stable -10. Outside, the Greenland plateau stretches unbroken in every direction. There are no trees, no buildings, no roads visible from the surface. From the air, the base does not exist. From the inside, it is a small city with a church, a cinema, a barbershop, and a reactor providing power, heat, and running water. A city with classified walls and a nuclear heart hidden under a glacier. The ice moved. Ice sheets flow under their own weight. The Greenland ice sheet moves at an average of roughly 20 to 40 meters per year at its margins. By 1966, the tunnel walls were deforming enough that structural integrity could not be guaranteed. The Army Corps of Engineers extracted the nuclear reactor. They did not extract the waste, radioactive coolant fluid, polychlorinated biphenyls, and unprocessed sewage were left under the ice, under the official logic that the sheet would bury and permanently entomb everything. The documents say this. In 2016, NASA's Operation Icebridge flew routine mapping passes over northwest Greenland. The mission was designed for climate research, measuring ice thickness to model sea level projections. The aircraft carried ice-penetrating radar capable of resolving structures through several hundred meters of ice. A University of Copenhagen team processing the raw radar data identified Camp Century with complete clarity. Tunnels, chambers, the contaminated waste sections, all of it preserved exactly as it was abandoned 50 years earlier. The ice did not destroy it. The ice kept it. A 2016 paper in Geophysical Research Letters calculated that the contaminated layer will reach the surface as the ice sheet continues losing mass. The timeline, depending on emissions trajectories, falls between 2090 and 2015. The ice buried it. NASA's instruments found it anyway. If this holds you, subscribe. Each discovery ahead goes further than Camp Century, further down, further back, further from anything we expected to find. From Greenland, we move to the most remote human research station on Earth, Vostok Station, East Antarctica. Latitude 78 degrees south, longitude 106 degrees east. The surface temperature record of minus 89.2 degrees Celsius was measured here in July 1983. It remains the lowest naturally occurring temperature ever recorded anywhere on the planet's surface. In the late 1980s, a joint Russian-French-American drilling team began extracting ice cores from beneath the station. At 3,769 meters, the drill bit changed behavior. Resistance dropped sharply. The core returned liquid water. Beneath 3,769 meters of ice, there is a lake. Lake Vostok is 250 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide, surface area approximately equal to Lake Ontario. Total volume: roughly 5,400 cubic kilometers of liquid fresh water that has had no contact with sunlight, with the atmosphere, or with any surface ecosystem for between 15 and 25 million years. 15 million years. To put that in perspective, when the lake was last opened to the sky, there were no modern humans. There were no primates recognizable as our ancestors. The continents were in approximately their current positions, but the world above the Antarctic ice was a different planet. Water pressure at 350 atmospheres keeps the lake liquid at minus 3 degrees Celsius. Below, a geothermal heat source in the bedrock provides steady warmth. The weight of 3,769 meters of ice pressing down from above exceeds the crush depth of any submarine ever built by a factor of several times. When the Russian team breached the lake surface in February 2012, the water column shot upward 16 meters through the drill hole. The pressure differential was larger than engineers had calculated. The borehole refroze within hours. DNA analysis of samples extracted from the refrozen borehole returned results that caused significant scientific debate. Bacteria were identified, genus and species not present in any existing scientific database, not closely related to any cataloged organism. One camp argues these bacteria evolved in complete isolation over 20 million years, adapting to perpetual darkness, crushing pressure, and temperatures near freezing. They represent a branch of life with no contact with surface evolution since Antarctica glaciated. The other camp argues the contamination protocols during drilling were insufficient and the organisms came from the drilling fluid. Write in the comments which camp you are closer to personally. The lake is still there. The team estimates they sampled perhaps 2% of its total volume. The ice buried it. NASA's instruments found it anyway. From the East Antarctic Plateau, we move inward without leaving the ice, deeper into a geological impossibility. The International Polar Year ran from 2007 to 2009. 19 nations cooperated on a radar mapping campaign of the entire Antarctic continent. Aircraft from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the British Antarctic Survey, and Germany's Alfred Wegener Institute flew systematic grids, sending radar pulses through the ice to map the bedrock below. In the central sector of East Antarctica, the data showed something that stopped the processing team: a mountain range, 1,200 kilometers long, peaks reaching 3,400 meters above sea level, as tall as the highest points of the European Alps, buried under 4 kilometers of ice. The Gamburtsev Mountains. Geologists date the Gamburtsevs at over 1 billion years old. At that age, under the weathering glacial erosion and tectonic settling that have reshaped every other comparably aged surface feature on this planet, the mountains should have been ground to flat plains hundreds of millions of years ago. The processes that destroy mountains work slowly, but 1 billion years is not a short time. The Antarctic ice sheet arrived approximately 34 million years ago. Before that, the Gamburtsevs were exposed to the atmosphere and to erosion for nearly 1 billion years. They did not erode. Fausto Ferraccioli of the British Antarctic Survey, publishing in Nature in 2011, described the range as one of the most geologically perplexing features ever mapped. The leading hypothesis involves an unusually dense lithospheric root beneath the range that resisted erosion beyond any comparable structure. a keel of ancient rock so cold and rigid that normal tectonic and weathering processes could not grind it down. The hypothesis is not confirmed. No drilling has reached far enough beneath the Gamburtsevs to test it directly. What is confirmed is the shape of the mountains themselves. The radar imaging resolved individual valleys, ridgelines, and peak elevations. The Gamburtsevs are not a flat plateau with minor relief. They are jagged. They have the topographic profile of a young mountain range still in the process of forming, not a range that has had 1 billion years to be worn smooth. 1 billion years old, intact. Under 4 kilometers of ice, the ice buried them. NASA's instruments found them anyway. South and west of the Gamburtsevs, on the margin where the continent meets the Amundsen Sea, sits the glacier that glaciologists refer to as the Doomsday Glacier. The name is technical, not dramatic. Thwaites Glacier runs 120 kilometers wide at its marine margin. It holds enough ice to raise global sea levels by 65 centimeters if it collapses completely. It acts as a structural buttress restraining the larger West Antarctic ice sheet, which holds enough additional ice to add 3 meters to global sea levels. Thwaites is the linchpin. In 2019, NASA's Operation Icebridge and researchers from the University of California, Irvine, published results from a combination of satellite radar interferometry and airborne ice-penetrating radar passes over the glacier's base. The mission was designed to map the grounding line, the boundary where ice lifts off bedrock. What the instruments returned instead was a void, 40 kilometers long, 3 kilometers wide, 300 meters from floor to ceiling, 14 billion tons of ice melted from the inside in a cavity hidden beneath the surface of a glacier the size of Florida. Stand inside it. 300 meters of glacial ceiling above you. The floor is scraped bare bedrock. The walls are pale blue-white, sheeted in meltwater running constantly in the dark. Behind you, through a channel that no previous model predicted, ocean water from the Amundsen Sea pushes in warmer than any projection accounted for. The cavity is not stable. It is growing. No ice loss model from the previous decade included this void. No projection of Thwaites' timeline survived the finding unrevised. Every calculation of sea level rise timelines tied to West Antarctic ice collapse had to be revised after this publication. The 2019 paper described the cavity as evidence that Thwaites was losing ice from its base at rates significantly higher than remote sensing data had suggested. The warm water intrusion responsible for it had been happening for years, possibly decades, entirely out of sight under the glacier's surface. It only became visible when an instrument capable of penetrating ice looked directly at the base. The ice buried it. NASA's instruments found it anyway. Now we return to East Antarctica, to the sector that received little scientific attention until 2006, when Ralph von Fries at Ohio State University finished processing data from the GRACE satellite mission, Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment, a joint project of NASA and the German Aerospace Center launched in 2002. GRACE mapped variations in Earth's gravitational field with enough precision to detect subsurface mass concentrations through kilometers of ice and rock. The data from the Wilkes Land sector of East Antarctica returned an anomaly. A mass concentration beneath the ice, roughly circular in shape, centered at 70 degrees south, 120 degrees east. The structure is 500 kilometers across. The Chicxulub crater in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, which ended the Cretaceous period and eliminated the non-avian dinosaurs 66 million years ago, is 180 kilometers in diameter. The Wilkes Land structure is nearly 3 times that size. Remember the image from the opening, the vast circular depression in the ice, the scale so immense that anything at its rim is invisible. This is what the instruments see beneath that ice. Not a tunnel, not a lake, not mountains. A structure the size of France buried under 2 kilometers of frozen water. Von Fries's team calculated that an impactor capable of producing a 500-kilometer crater would have struck with a force roughly 25 times greater than Chicxulub, It would have been larger than any object that has hit Earth in the past 500 million years that we can identify. It would have penetrated the crust into the mantle, releasing thermal energy on a scale that would have reshaped the planet's interior dynamics for millions of years afterward. The date von Friese's team estimated for the impact, based on correlation between the anomaly and surrounding geological data, approximately 252 million years ago. 252 million years ago is the date of the Permian-Triassic extinction event, the largest mass extinction in Earth's recorded history. 96% of all marine species gone, 70% of all terrestrial vertebrates gone. Life came within a measurable margin of not continuing on this planet. The standard explanation for the Permian-Triassic extinction centers on volcanic activity at the Siberian Traps, massive flood basalts on the opposite side of the globe from East Antarctica. Von Friese proposed that these are not competing explanations, but cause and effect. An impact of this magnitude would have sent shockwaves through the entire mantle, potentially triggering volcanic activity thousands of kilometers away. The hypothesis has not been confirmed. The structure has never been drilled. Geologists who reject the impact interpretation argue the mascon reflects bedrock features formed by other deep earth processes, mantle upwelling, ancient rift structures, crustal density variations. These are legitimate objections. What is confirmed is the anomaly itself. Its size is confirmed. Its circular geometry is confirmed. The timeline correlation is confirmed. And the scale is confirmed. Nothing else in Earth's geological record comes close to a circular mass anomaly of this diameter in a single location. If the Wilkes Land structure is an impact crater, it is the largest impact structure in Earth's known geological history. Not the largest we have confirmed, the largest by a factor of nearly 3. The ice buried it. NASA's instruments found it anyway. 5 things the ice was keeping: a nuclear city, the Army abandoned, and the ice preserved. A lake as large as one of the Great Lakes, sealed from sunlight for 20 million years, holding organisms not found anywhere else on the planet. A mountain range that survived 1 billion years of exposure without eroding. A cavity growing inside the most dangerous glacier on Earth, invisible to every model built to predict its behavior. A structure 3 times the size of the crater that ended the dinosaurs, buried beneath 2 kilometers of Antarctic ice, dated to the worst day in the history of life on Earth. What connects them is not the ice itself. It is the instrument pointed at the ice. Every one of these 5 finds came back from a mission designed for something else. Camp Century came from a climate radar measuring ice thickness. Lake Vostok came from a team drilling a climate record. The Gamburtsevs came from a bedrock mapping survey. The Thwaites cavity came from a glacier monitoring mission. Wilkes Land came from a satellite measuring gravitational variation for geodesy. No instrument was sent to find any of them. Every one of them arrived as a surprise. Large sections of East Antarctica have never been overflown by ice-penetrating radar at high resolution. The Gamburtsev survey covered a specific corridor. Whatever lies adjacent to those mountains was not in the flight path. The GRACE satellite has circled the entire planet, but its successor missions with higher precision are still returning data. Wilkes Land is confirmed. What surrounded it 252 million years ago has not been mapped. There is a pattern in how each of these discoveries was received. In every case, the finding was initially disputed. The Vostok Lake was considered a data artifact before follow-up drilling confirmed it. The Gamburtsev radar returns were checked 3 times before publication. The Thwaites cavity triggered a re-examination of the instruments before the team accepted the result. The Wilkes Land anomaly is still officially contested. Each time the data held, the ice had been keeping something real. The ice does not tell us what it holds. It holds everything, silently, in layers that compress a year into centimeters. Camp Century for 50 years. Lake Vostok for 20 million. The Gamburtsevs for 1 billion. Whatever struck Wilkes Land for 250 million years. We have read a small fraction of what it kept. What came back already changed the shape of everything we thought we knew.